Hello and welcome to the Blue Card podcast, Holocaust Survivor Stories Overcoming Historical Trauma. The mission of the Blue Card is to provide direct assistance to Holocaust survivors in need living in the United States. I am your host, Executive Director of the Blue Card, Masha Pearl. Each episode will contain interviews with Holocaust survivors and will explore a topic that affects us all. Joining us to explore these topics is renowned Holocaust survivor psychologist, Dr. Eva Fogelman. Dr. Fogelman is a licensed psychologist, author, and filmmaker. She's also a pioneer in developing groups for generations of the Holocaust, having co-founded and co-directed the first training program for clinicians to study psychotherapy with generations of the Holocaust and related traumas. Dr. Fogelman is in private practice for individuals, couples, and group psychotherapy. She's also a supervisor, consultant, and trainer in the field of post-traumatic stress disorder. Dr. Fogelman is the co-director of Child Development Research. She's also the founding director of the Jewish Foundation for Christian Rescuers, Anti-Defamation League, and many, many others. She wrote and co-produced the award-winning Breaking the Silence, The Generation After the Holocaust, and is the author of the Pulitzer Prize nominee, Conscience and Courage, Rescuers of Jews During the Holocaust. Dr. Fogelman is a founder of the Second Generation Movement as well as the Hidden Child Foundation. She also moderates Transforming Moments for the Museum of Jewish Heritage, a living memorial to the Holocaust, and is co-founder of the Descendants of Holocaust Survivors Facebook page. Born in a displaced person camp in Kassel, Germany, after World War II, Dr. Fogelman is daughter of Holocaust survivors, having lived in Israel as a child before coming to the United States in 1959. Dr. Fogelman received a bachelor's degree from Brooklyn College, where she majored in psychology. Today, Dr. Fogelman consults with the Blue Card on many topics relating to Holocaust survivors, and our theme for this episode is Never Give Up. Our guest joining us, which we are so fortunate to have a conversation with today, is Inge Auerbacher. Inge is a child survivor of the Holocaust. She was born in Kippenheim, a village in southwest Germany, on December 31st, 1934. Inge spent 3 years at the Terezin concentration camp in Czechoslovakia, between 7 to 10 years of age. She's the author of 6 books that are published in 9 different languages, and over 50 of her poems have been published. Many of them have been set to music by prominent composers. Some have been recorded and played on the radio and featured in films. Her list of published books include I Am a Star, Child of the Holocaust, Beyond the Yellow Star, To America, Finding Dr. Schatz, Children of Terror, Running Against the Wind, and Highway to New York. Without further ado, let's delve right in. Thank you, Dr. Fogelman and Inge Auerbacher.
Welcome, Inge. You were born as a Jew in Germany, a year after Hitler became Chancellor of Germany.
Right.
First concentration camp, Dachau, was already built. Jews-owned stores or professional private practices suffered boycotts on April 1st, 1939. Jewish books were born. Your civil Jewish servants in Germany lost their jobs. Academics were ousted from the university. Tell us a little bit about what it was like for your parents to bring a Jewish child into that world.
Well, thank you, by the way, for inviting me here today. Thank you, Eva. And well, we really didn't believe what was going on in the beginning. You know, it was too terrible to even think about. What? Germany? My father was a disabled war veteran in World War I. He had the Iron Cross. We lived in Germany for hundreds of years. Jews lived in Germany over 1,000 years. We were never more than about 500,000, but it was home. And how could this happen? These are intelligent people. These are cultured people. It's impossible to think. And here, my mother got pregnant. Of course, she was married, of course. And people were saying, you know, things don't look so good right now. How can you bring a child into the world? And her pregnancy was extremely difficult. There was only one doctor in the village, and my father decided I have to be born in the house that he was born in, a house that we owned over 100 years in this village of about 1,000 people, about 60 Jewish families. And it was a very difficult pregnancy. Usually you have a person, a midwife to deliver the children. She needed a doctor. And the doctor already, he was not Jewish. When you think all doctors are Jewish, well, he wasn't. And he already belonged to the Nazi party. And he came many times to my mother's bedside wearing the Nazi uniform even. And he still was good to his Jewish patients. And in life, you have choices. You can choose one way to be a good person, stay a good person, or to become a very bad person, to join the hoodlums that were around already, starting up with the Nazi parties and stuff. And I remember I remember Crystal Night, sure, but my mother told me, and my father told me too, that when this event took place and the Jewish people were being harassed, this doctor told them, don't do that, stop it. But later on, he probably did some horrible things, and he was in prison for many years. I don't know exactly what he did, but it must have been pretty bad that he was in prison for many years. But I cannot say anything bad about him. He gave me the gift of life.
Gave you
In fact,
life. And tell us a little bit about what you personally remember from Kristallnacht at that time.
Everything. Yeah. I was not even 4 years old. And my grandparents had come to see us, and we were an Orthodox family, modern Orthodox. Grandpa went to the synagogue in the morning to say his morning prayers, and he was arrested from his prayers, and with all the other people that were arrested on that day, boys from the age of 16, and of course the men, only men and boys, not women and children. And the Nazi came to our house, arrested my father, and sent him to the group where they were gathering the men. And then they started the whole pogrom. They started to burn the synagogue, but they stopped it immediately because there were Christian houses nearby, and they would have gone up in flames too. But they made a tremendous mess of the synagogue. They broke everything down. They tore up the Torah rolls. And then the riot really, really began. We had a large house, 18 rooms, and they started to break all the windows in the Jewish houses, breaking into the stores. And I remember we're staying in the living room, and they saw that we still had a chandelier hanging. He said, look, the chandelier is still hanging. I threw a big rock through the broken window. My mother just pulled me away that I would not be hit by by the stone, by the brick actually. And we were hiding then in a shed in the backyard. We had a very big backyard. And so we were hiding there the whole day. All the men were gone. Only women and children were left in the village. We had no clue where they were going. Absolutely no clue. They were sent to Dachau. And my father and my grandfather were in barrack number 16. I went back there, and they only have little stones, they're markers, to mark the barracks because they're all broken down now by this time. It was all number 16. And after a few weeks, somehow they permitted the men to come home again. And of course, they had to take
miraculous.
They had to take off all their clothes, wore those blue and white striped uniforms, had to stand at attention for hours. They had a big parade ground there, and if somebody even blew their nose, they were hosed up with ice cold water. They had no underwear on. It was very, very cold to stand there for hours and hours. And I remember my father told us we were quite religious. And my grandfather said they were in the same barrack. I can't eat that food. It's not kosher. So my father said, you got to eat it. You want to stay alive? You better eat it. This is life.
Tell us a little bit about what you felt. Did you cry at the time? I remember that did you already have the doll that your mother gave, that your
My grandmother gave it to me.
Doll?
I had already the doll, but she was in safekeeping. And when that happened, I mean, we were just so scared. And at night, we went to a neighbor's house, a Jewish family, to spend the night with them. And all the windows were broken there too, which eventually we had to board up and replace. And we had to pay for that damage.
Now, you started at the age of 5. You went to kindergarten.
No, I didn't go to kindergarten. I went one day to kindergarten. It was a Christian kindergarten, but from the town's kids. I was too homesick. I couldn't stand it. I didn't like maybe one day I went.
And what happened with schooling for you after that?
What happened?
When you had to start first grade.
Well, that's a long time after that, because then my father came back from Dachau, my grandfather, and we knew we had to leave Germany. We sold the house, moved in with my grandparents about 300 miles away, something like that. My grandfather was a cattle dealer, as were many of the Jewish people in those little shtetls, villages. And we thought we could get a visa. That was the whole thing. We got to get out. How? What? Wrote to everybody. It didn't work. And we stayed there. And I will say they were the last Jewish family in that village. At one time, it was 40% Jewish. That happened very, very infrequently, that a little village, not like in Poland where you had many times whole villages Jewish, but this was like 40% Jewish. And my grandparents were the last Jewish family living in that village. And I will say those 2 years that we stayed there, from the age of about 5, 4.5, 5, but those maybe a year and a half, 2 years there, it was the only childhood I had. The Christian children actually played with me. I wasn't told I'm a bad Jew, a dirty Jew. They all played with me. And that year and a half or so was a good time for me. But some of the Christian people gave me some extra food. Because, you had the ration cards already there, and you had to shop in separate places and so forth. And then the transports began in 1941.
Can you just tell us what it was like for you in 1941 to get to wear the mandatory yellow star? What was that like for you?
Well, we had to pay for those stars too. And from the age of 6, you had to wear that yellow star. And it became quite difficult when I had to start school when I was 6 years old. And Jewish children had to go to a separate school, not to the school the town school. We were at that time already, it was already very, very difficult. And eventually my parents had to do some slave labor. In the beginning, my father took me to the place where the train was. It was about 2 kilometers to get to the train from the village. And then he took me on a bicycle. Sometimes he would try to get on the sleigh. That was a big sled that went through. We hung on to the edge of that. It was winter. And then he took me to the school in Stuttgart, the capital of Württemberg. And then eventually they had to do slave labor. And there were some children, half Jewish in that town, who went with me, but they didn't like to go to school. So I did it all by myself. When I think back, I'm 6 years old. I'm wearing the yellow star. And people are looking at me. So my father said, try to sit in such a way lean on the left side of near the window that you can cover it, like lean like this. It wasn't always possible because there were some rowdies on the train and they would heckle me, of course. I only remember one good thing that happened. A Christian woman, I mean, she didn't wear a star, so obviously she was Christian. She had a little bag in her hand, probably her lunch. And as she walked out, she didn't speak one word with me. She put that little bag of rolls next to me. I never forgot that good woman without a name, because I never, she just walked out. And she gave me her lunch, probably. And this is so many years ago. You see, she had a choice in life. Do good. And she felt sorry, I guess, for this little girl, 6 years old, who goes alone on a train with a star. It was very dangerous.
And what you were really a brave little courageous girl to be
Yes.
able to follow instructions of how to get to a school that was so far away.
Yes,
And
it was an hour almost on the train. And then you had to walk far too. Very busy streets, yeah, with cars going. And my father always told me, you have to be at the train station when the little, when the little pointer on your watch is on 3 and the big one is at 12. Remember that. You have to be very careful. You've got to be on the train station to go home.
Tell us a little bit about what you remember of being deported to Theresienstadt.
Well, there were transports from 1941. Actually, my hometown, the transport started in 1940. All the Jews in the state of Württemberg, southwestern Germany, were sent to a camp called Gürs, but we were no longer living there. So we were spared for that. But the route was also, if you couldn't get a visa at that time in the camp, some people still had visa. There was a possibility to get out. That's all the way north in the Spanish area, French-Spanish area. So we were sort of, still safe until 41. And then the transports began. We had our papers to go to Riga. We didn't really know where those transports went. In the meantime, my grandfather died, and my grandmother and us, the mother and father, were in that transport. We had the number, we had everything. And my father, he knew what it was like to be in Dachau. This was the initiation. This can't be good. Will be terrible. And he had my mother write a letter to the Gestapo that he's a disabled war veteran with the Iron Cross, and somehow we got out of that transport. And most of those people who went to Riga, they were killed. A lot of them were killed in those forests, where my grandmother most likely was killed, in the Birkendicker forest. I went there, by the way, to see the place. And then there were other transports. Ispica was another one. I think we got out of that too somehow. And then there was Terezin in 1942, Theresienstadt in German. And I was at that time 7 years old. My number was Roman numeral 13-1-408. I still have my papers.
So what did you take with you when you went to the concentration camp?
Well, we were ordered to go into a school gymnasium in the town because we had to leave the house. When my grandmother was sent out, they just said, put the keys on the table, leave the house, and we had to move into Jewish houses in the neighboring town. They took it away. So, I wanted, for number one, I wanted to take my doll with me. And and I had a little brooch that I liked, a Dutch boy pin. My mother put it on, and a few layers of clothing, because we never knew, where we're going. We had no clue. They said, oh, it's an old age place and you'll be safe. But mostly, Terezin was a place where you had the intelligentsia of Europe. You had the disabled war veterans, highly decorated war veterans. And they came from different countries, mainly Czechoslovakia, Germany, even Holland, at the end, Denmark too. So when we were checked, open everything on the table, and one of the people, the Nazis, who were checking us, he saw I have a little brooch. Dutch boy, when he ripped it off me, and he said in the Swabian dialect, "Du brauchst es nicht, wo du hingehst. You won't need this where you're going to." Where am I going? Then he saw my doll, and he ripped her from me. And he looked in her hollow body. My doll had rubber bands inside, so you could lift the head. She had once an accident. They had to put a new head on. That's why she had rubber bands. And of course, I didn't hide anything there. And I made a big fuss because I was not going to let him keep my doll. And he gave it back. And I had her almost till, I gave it to the Holocaust Museum quite a few years ago. And and by the way, I gave her the name Marlene, Marlene Dietrich, because she had blonde hair and blue eyes. But I found out later, she was actually made for the 1936 Olympics with the name Inge. That was the model, because Inge was a very German name at that time. That's why my parents and friends, they gave me, they had a big, put things in a hat and drew out the names. What are we going to name that girl? So it came out Inge. And she was made for the 1936 Olympics. Very German, blue eyes and blonde hair. And she's in the arms of a little Jewish girl with dark hair, curly hair.
And tell us a little bit of what it was like for you in Terezin. You were there for 3 years.
3 years, yeah. Well, when I was the youngest in that transport from that area in Stuttgart, and I was 7 at that time. And we went in a regular train, very crowded, took about 2 days. We didn't know where we're going. And all of a sudden you could look out the window, there's strange looking signs, different language. What is it? It was Czech. And we arrived in Terezin, and then they took away, and they said, drop everything and you'll see your stuff later. Of course, you never did, only what you wore. And we had to walk about 2 kilometers to the camp from Bohušovice in Czech. And there were many old people, they couldn't walk, they were lying on the side already. And then we arrived in the Schleuse, they called it, they searched everything, and they put us then in, Terezin was a military town, so they had these big barracks made out of brick, huge ones, and they put us up in the attic of the Dresden barrack, which was the biggest one. The whole camp was really set up with brick walls, brick barracks, barbed wire, and wooden fences. So we up there, no beds, nothing. On the floor, we had a blanket, and people walking around, they were like zombies walking. Where are we? We don't know. They promised the people, oh, you will have an apartment. And one man asked, I read about that, where is the Park Street or the Ocean Street? Where is my apartment? They said, yeah, you're in the right place. Here you're going to sleep. And one lady, I was the youngest, so one Czech woman who was there before, she came up to this terrible attic area. People were already trying to kill themselves. My father pulled in one man from our transport. He was hanging out of a little dormer window, and he just couldn't stand it. In the first few days, and my father gave him hope. He said, no, you're not going to do this. We're going to get through this. You will see, it will get better. Pulled him in. Next day, he was in the courtyard, killed himself. There was a woman who helped us a little bit. She was there before, Czech woman from Prague. And her son was there was a room for children. He had already a mattress. You could, like in 2-3 parts, you could put them together. So she asked, is there a child in the transfer? She gave me a piece of the mattress, and then she brought me into that room with only children. And I slept on the floor on the mattress. And there was a few of them were sick already with scarlet fever. And of course, I got it. And then I landed up almost immediately, a few weeks later, in what was called a hospital. There were 2 children in every bed. And I had a little girl from Luxembourg. the wet was always wet, and we couldn't see our parents. We were separated. I could only look down on walking over the beds. There was like a little window, and my father was downstairs. We had a whistle, so I knew what it was. And then I would come to the window. And I was in that hospital about, let's say, from September till just before my birthday, December. And it's coming up right now, December 31. And finally, I was full of lice and boils on my head, on my whole body. I had scarlet fever and all kinds of children's diseases. And then I came home. I had, then I joined my parents, and the disabled war veterans were allowed to live together, very crowded condition, 40 in the room, double bed, bunk beds. And we had dysentery and all the terrible diseases. Yeah.
Well, yeah, you forgot the tuberculosis.
Well, that comes later.
That came later. Okay.
That came later. Yes, that was
Tell us
terrible.
a little bit about the tuberculosis.
Well, there was some children in the block where we were, and one of them we knew she was sick, and we were told, "Don't go near her. She has a terrible sickness, and you'll catch it. It's awful." But we played with her. Turned out she had TB. Many of the people had TB. Well, I prayed to God, whatever she has can't be so bad. I want to have what she has. And unfortunately, I got it. And that disease, tuberculosis of both of my lungs, it would haunt me for the rest of my life.
I know you had a lot of friends, little girls that you became very friendly with, and you wrote a poem for one of them, Hold Me Tight. Would you like to read us the poem, Hold Me Tight?
And I would like to introduce it. We lived in a room with this family from Berlin. They had a daughter exactly my age, and her mother was Jewish, the father half, and she was brought up as a Christian. And they were sent on the transport. They were included. And of course, they went to Auschwitz. And one day I'm sitting at the table in America, and I wrote a poem about her. How did she feel when this happened? Come with me, my child. Hold my hand. Be calm, my child. Do not try to understand. Don't be afraid, my child. Walk with pride. You know your mother is here at your side. Hold me tight. Day has turned to night. Soon we'll see the light. A mother's giving hope to a child where there is none. No, no, don't look at the chimneys. See the blue sky. My arm is around to protect you. Don't cry. Come close. Let the blows fall on me. There'll be a day when again we'll be free. Hold me tight. Day has turned to night. Soon we'll see the light. Give all your belongings to them. Quickly undress. One day soon we will again have happiness. Sleep, my child. I have no more to give. Oh God, we are not going to live. Hold me tight. Day has turned to night. Hold me tight.
Must have been so difficult to lose one friend after another in that way, and fear of, am I next going to be deported like the others? And tell us a little bit about what did it feel like when liberation happened? What was liberation like for you? How did your family begin a new life in Germany?
Well, it was finally on May 8th, 1945, we were liberated by the Russian army, Soviet army actually, but they still were, in the last days, they were still throwing in hand grenades. One just zipped by me. We were hiding in a dark cellar. And the only thing I had with me was a prayer book. I still didn't give up my religion that my father found in the garbage. So finally they came, and there was a tremendous typhus epidemic. And then the bus came to pick up the survivors. We were sent to Stuttgart in a displaced persons camp. And then we decided to go back to my mother's hometown. We thought for sure Grandma would be standing at the door. She wasn't. We lost at least 20 people, 13 immediate family members, and altogether 20. And we stayed in Germany only about 9 months. And then we came to America in 1946 in May.
And what was it like for you to come to America? What was the early life?
Well, to me, it was a wonderland. My parents got a job as a maid and butler in a rich home. And I had a kind of a cough. And I was, I didn't think I was sick or anything, but I didn't feel good. And the lady said, well, we got to take her to the doctor. And he said, well, he took the x-rays and everything. Well, she's very sick. She has TB on both of her lungs. And they put me into a hospital, children's hospital, public hospital, for 2 years, totally in bed, complete bed rest. There was nothing else. There was no drug at that time. Finally, after 2 years, my parents had enough. They said, we're taking her home. We have an apartment now in Brooklyn. And they took me home, not well yet. And then it got even worse. I got to the point of hemorrhaging, which is probably the end. And then one doctor said, we have something new. Let's try it, because there was no medicine that would help. It was streptomycin, the first drug, antibiotic against TB, and I had to have 2 shots every day. And it helped, but it was not the end. I came back a few times, even when I started high school. At the first time in school, really, because I never finished my first grade, was when I was 15 years old. That was the first time I really went to school. I finished that in 3 instead of 4 years. I went to college. Then I got sick again. They threw me out of college because I was sick. Another year in bed. I had spent 4 years in bed with this. And again, streptomycin and 26 pills a day. Other medicine came about. And years later, I found out who was the discoverer of this miraculous drug, and I thought it was.
A little bit about how you found him and the
Yes.
fact that you,
Yes.
that 2 of you
Yes.
wrote a
book.
book together.
Yes. Well, I found him. Actually, I always thought that Waxman, who got the Nobel Prize, imagine, it was one of the most important discoveries of the 20th century. And I saw in a newspaper an article about the dose of God, and a little thing that he wrote, not even a paragraph. It said, Albert Schatz, co-discoverer of antibiotic streptomycin. Oh my God, he's still alive. I got to meet him. I want to put my arm around him and thank him for saving my life. And I met him and I said to him, Albert, this is a book. And he said, let's write it together. Well, eventually it became, but I did most of it. And unfortunately, he died.
The awful part about the story is that he was a student at the time at Rutgers University, and that his professor, Dr. Selman Waxman, is the one who got the Nobel Prize.
He did.
And he was basically cheated out of.
He was cheated out of
that
absolutely. But in Europe, when the professor does anything, he gets credit for everything. But he would sleep in the basement nights on a bench to do this. He was a poor Jewish boy, born in America. And he saved millions of lives. When I first met him, I went by bus to Philly and we embraced each other. It was the moment of my life to say thank you to the man who saved your life. I wouldn't be here for sure. And neither would millions of others.
Absolutely. And thank you for writing the book and really setting the history straight that the Dr. Albert Schatz really deserves the credit that he didn't get.
No, and it happens, unfortunately.
You were homeschooled until high school was the first.
Not really. It wasn't really schooling. A teacher would come, She couldn't walk the 3 flights of stairs when we were in Brooklyn. I taught myself a lot. I had books. I started to write a little bit. And so when I got a degree in chemistry, and I worked for 38 years as a chemist, and I've spoken all over the world, literally, got many awards, including 2 doctorates.
So why don't we, you are definitely somebody who never gives up. Why don't
No,
we begin with 1981, there was a world gathering of Holocaust survivors in Israel, and your song was set to music, We Shall Never Forget. Could you just give us 2 lines from that song?
yeah, sure. I found somebody, it was my first song. I've written poems a long time. And I found a girl in the ladies' room in the hospital, in ladies' dressing room. And she was in music, and her name is Rosalie Comentucci. Now she's married, it's O'Hara, Rosalie Comentucci O'Hara. And I gave it to her, and she said, I love it, I love it. Within a day, she had the melody. And then I approached some people, because I wanted this to be done for this first ever gathering of Jewish Holocaust survivors. It was in Jerusalem. And I was very grateful that the second generation decided to do it. It was the only original song at that time. And I was very grateful to that. And then came many others that I wrote. So.
Always remember, we shall never forget. Trumpets of joy sound freedom's call. Love for God and man above all. We shall never forget.
Tell us a little bit of what it was like for your parents to to make it in America. Your father had been a businessman who had a textile business in Germany. What was it like for them in America, and how did they also
it was very, very difficult. I mean, in Germany, we had maids taking care of the house, and all of a sudden, my mother is the maid, but it was okay. And my father, the butler, we were doing quite well after the war. And we came here with nothing, absolutely nothing, no job. And it was difficult, but we made it. And and I decided at that time when I graduated, I want to be a doctor. And I was pre-med, but lots of things happened. I got accepted to Heidelberg med school, but they were singing Nazi songs at that time. And I came home, but I worked 38 years in my profession. And a lot of speaking about this, about tolerance and about choosing the right way to live, not to hate.
So tell us about the transforming moment that you had, that all of a sudden you decide to talk about yourself, and then obviously all the lessons of racism and
I tell you, after the
how did all that begin for you? I mean, here you are, you're a chemist, working in a lab,
right,
and and trying to cope with having relationships and and being rejected because you had TB.
I was rejected in marriage too. Yes, by doctors. One was a veterinarian even. No, I really was very busy working, but I remember after I came back from Israel, I met some people, some younger, my age at that time. We were the younger ones, besides the second generation. But I met somebody at one of the meetings. His name was Mark Berkowitz, and he was a Mengele twin. And he said to me, Inge, you have to go with me. You're the girl, I'm the boy. We must get together. We have to spread that story. We have to do some good things and to remember those 1.5 million Jewish children who were murdered, who will never have a life, and we have. I started with him. He took me along, but I said, look, Mark, I have a job. He wasn't working. He had some disability. And I said, I can't go all the time with you. I have to take a day off and everything. But then when I retired, I went all over. Yeah. but he started me. And I remember he wore a pin, Zahor, and I wrote a song also with Sal Zim. I wrote 4 songs with him, which he actually recorded. One of them is called Zahor. When I saw that pin he was wearing, remember.
Tell us a little bit about the song that you wrote, Who Am I?
Well, Who Am I is a long story. I had the poem, and I was looking for somebody else to put the music to. And I found the composer through the radio, actually. There was Orrin Hatch, who had written Senator Orrin Hatch of Utah, Mormon. And I listened to the radio, and it was Christmas time, and this guy, Smerconish, said, oh, the most famous Christmas song was written by a Jew, Irving Berlin, White Christmas. And now a Mormon wrote a Hanukkah song. So what? And I'm listening to this 8 days of Hanukkah, and who did the music? And I thought he did. Then I went to the YouTube, and I went to find out who this person was. It wasn't he, just the words. And I found this woman, Madeline Stone. And I told her I'm looking for somebody. We're doing a film right now, a documentary with another girl, a Polish Catholic girl, actually, who was in labor camps. And he said, send it to me. And she had this song. And then I found the chorus who did it, because this PS22 is a very famous children's choir. I saw them on television. They were on the Oscars. They sang at the Oscars. It took me about 3 years to get in touch with them. So that's how that song went. And it is already, I wanted this song to be around the world. It is already in the Rwanda language, or Rwanda from the genocide, one of them, beautifully sung. It's in German and in Russian probably too. I would like to, but then came COVID, so that stopped everything.
Wow. Now, along the way, you also met a Božena Ubranovich.
Obanovich,
Gilbride.
Yes.
And she was a Polish child during the war, a Polish Christian.
Yes.
And tell us a little bit about how you met her and how the two of you ended up writing a book together.
Unfortunately, she died recently, about a year ago. I went to some of these meetings, and she was there speaking too. Her story was different. She was in labor camps and Polish Catholic from a little village. And we befriended each other. And so I didn't see her for some years, but then we got together. I said, I would like to write your story. So she said, let's do it together. And this was very interesting, how a Polish Catholic woman and a German Jewish woman who had similar experiences, who wrote this together. We have a film on it as well. And we spoke in Poland. It's in Polish as well, in German, also this book. And we went to Poland to speak a whole month over there. I had to have a translator. We became very good friends. And same age, too.
Wow. Now, one of the things is that you got the United Nations Children's Choir to sing a song that you wrote, A World of Peace.
Oh, that one is that Madeline Stone wrote. And I saw the kids at the Oscars singing. They're quite famous. They sang everywhere. Obama's inauguration, the second one, I said, oh my God, they look so wonderful. They were every color of the rainbow. Black, Spanish. They were just perfect. I said, I love those children. I want them. This is perfect. And we were rejected, actually, at the United Nations. I told them a few times, why don't you take us? Here you have a Catholic woman who was in the camp, a Jewish one, and the same age kids. Oh, it's finished. It's all, the program is booked every time. Then one day somebody told me, well, the program wasn't so good with the singing, your kids would be fabulous. I tried again. I sent them the music, the kids singing. I said, we want you. And we give you 5 minutes. 5 minutes for 3 books. I said, I'll take it. Then she said 4 minutes. I said, no, I can't do 4. So then I did the 5. It came out to about 7 minutes. They said it's one of the best speeches they ever heard. And I did it, 3 books in about 6, 7 minutes. And of course, they loved the children.
Well, you know, Inge, you are one of these people who are a tremendous, tremendous role model for all those children who've experienced historical traumas and have been robbed of their childhood. You were robbed of your childhood, really, not just
my teenage years too. I was in bed.
And your teenage years.
Absolutely.
And also you were robbed of, you know, being able to get married, have a family as a result of people who were afraid of tuberculosis in those days.
Stigma.
Your trials and tribulations are a role model for others to never give up.
You never give up. I never give up.
Much for being a role model for others to never give up.
Yeah, and I that's what I tell them too. I mean, I never talked about my life being sick until now, recently, because it doesn't matter to me anymore. I mean, I'm not getting married, or I don't have to, you know, prove anything to anybody anymore. So I had to tell my whole story, because most survivors after the war, you know, they picked themselves up. Not that many were really, really sick. Yes, they had terrible problems too, but mine went on for years and years and years. It never just ended, you know? And
well,
so, but
you never gave up. And
no,
here
never,
you are.
no, never.
To really to give hope to many young children today who also have lost their lives to historical traumas. So
absolutely, there's always there's always light at the end of a dark tunnel, and you have to believe that.
Yeah, so thank you so much, Inge. A lot came up for me while listening to your incredible story of survival, and my gratitude to Dr. Fogelman for your contributions. I would like to remind our subscribers that if you are a Holocaust survivor or know of a Holocaust survivor who is in need of financial assistance, medical assistance, dental assistance, social support, or otherwise, please contact the Blue Card at info@bluecardfund.org or 212-239-2251. That's all the time we have today. Thank you for tuning in to the Blue Card podcast, Holocaust Survivor Stories, Overcoming Historical Trauma. On the next episode, we will continue to explore the theme, Never Give Up. Until next time.